Welcome back to Lantern TV. I'm Jack Diwik, and today we're joined by a very special guest, OSU Athletic Director Ross Bjork. Ross, thanks for coming in.
Jack, thanks for having me.
For sure.
Great to be back here in the new Lantern studios.
What do you think about it?
I think it's awesome. I think just giving back to student journalism and seeing the university commitment, I think is really awesome. So good to be here in your new studios.
And we really appreciate you coming in. So
Absolutely.
let's just dive right into it. Spring ball just came to a close with the spring game on Saturday. And it's an interesting time for Buckeye football. 51 new players, 27 of them freshmen. I mean, that's pretty unheard of here at Ohio State. How do you expect Ryan and kind of the staff to adjust to that many new faces on the team?
Yeah, it seems like every 6 months we keep saying it's a new era in college athletics, let alone, college football. And, here's another iteration of that, right? And so when you think about, just where we are as a program, excellence is the standard. We set the tone in so many ways, whether it's recruiting, whether it's consistency of performance, longevity of success, national championships, every metric, fan attendance, revenue, TV viewership, every metric, Ohio State, is at the top. And so in this evolution, I think you always have to be nimble and you always have to be fluid. And I give credit to Coach Day where he's not afraid to embrace change, to adapt to this new era. We should always lean into recruiting the best high school football players, period. We can do that here at Ohio State. We have a proven track record, of course. But now in this era, older teams are having success. And so with the addition of young men in the transfer portal, with the addition of retention, which a lot of times doesn't get a lot of attention, when you retain an experienced offensive line, you retain your quarterback, the best receiver in the country, the best football player in the country, and Jeremiah. A lot of people just sort of brush that aside and they say, well, who are the new guys? So the retention piece, the transfer piece, we're an older team now. And that's going to come, I think with just a lot of success, a lot of, just continuity of the program to maintain our position. Knowing that we have the toughest schedule, I think, in the country with the 5 road games that we have, with Oregon here at home, the team up north, Illinois is an emerging program. So I think just credit to the adaptability and the leadership of Coach Day to say, this is where we are, let's be fluid, but let's also make sure we don't forget who we are as a program. So all of those things come into play to where we sit today going into the summer.
For sure, and 9 out of 11 starters on offense returning, pretty huge. And then you kind of mentioned it, but a lot of experience through the transfer portal. A lot of these guys have played a lot of football. And you kind of mentioned it, like when you see teams like Indiana, whose average age was hovering around 22 years old last year, was that kind of like a strategy going into the portal was to get older?
Well, first of all, the strategy should be what's best for Ohio State. You monitor trends, you look and see what happened. Clearly, we had a young team. A lot of people don't realize that. We had a young team last year. You play those older teams like Indiana, like Miami, those are the 2 teams that we lost to. So you sort of analyze that, you say, okay, do we pivot exactly to that point, or do we continue to say, no, this is what Buckeye football is all about. This is what we do here at Ohio State. So I think it's a combination of both. You have to understand your history, you have to understand current analytics, and then you have to adapt, to what's coming. So I think we've kind of embraced all of it. But to me, you don't have to react one way or another because we set that standard. People really react to us. And so those are the kind of things that you kind of lean into as you go into the offseason. And I was in the war room with Coach Day, with Mark Pantoni, a lot of our staff. We were in there because, we wanted to make sure that we were all aligned in terms of, okay, how are we prepping this team? Who's coming in? Are they the right fit from a character, from a style of play perspective? So it was a lot of fun seeing all the pieces, come together.
What's it like being in that war room with Day? I mean, is that just a chaotic time? I mean, I've got to imagine you only got a few weeks, right? So it's got to be long days and stuff. What's that like?
It's a lot of cell phones laid out on the table. It's a lot of Zoom meetings. It's a lot of assistant coaches coming in and out. Hey, I just had a conversation with this young man and his family. I think we're trending in this direction, or hey, this person just canceled a visit. I mean, there's a lot of fluidity to the process. So, but that's what's great about being around Coach Day is he's organized. He has a plan. Our job is to support him, provide the resources so that we can be successful. So, it's a great working relationship that Coach Day and I have together.
For sure. And you mentioned setting the standard here at Ohio State. And with the spring game Saturday, there was something that came out, a kind of new thing where there was an NIL roundup option at the Horseshoe, where fans can round up to the nearest dollar, and all proceeds went to the NIL fund. And then there was also the Saddle Up event Saturday.
Yeah.
And I guess, with more Power 4 teams kind of being able to level the playing field, so to speak, financially, how important is it to be creative with your NIL stuff like that?
Yeah, again, sort of, every 6 months things change, right? And sort of new ideas come to the table. And, I frequent Nutter Ace Hardware in Upper Arlington. And when I check out there, I can round up to Children's Miracle Network.
Yeah.
So this concept is not new. Shout out to our friends at Nutter Ace Hardware. The concept is not new of sort of rounding up. But again, in this era, people, they want to invest. They want to invest in our players. They want to, give directly, to our athletes. And now we have avenues. So, that money that's raised and generated, and this was kind of the first time we did it, and obviously we'll do it, going into the football season. That money will just go into our Champs Fund in the Buckeye Club. That offsets any sort of revenue sharing that we're going to provide to the athlete. It's not a one-on-one NIL deal that an individual fan is going to do with an athlete by rounding up, but hopefully they see value in helping the cause. Hopefully they see value in driving more and more revenue to the bottom line of our athletic department. We generate a lot of revenue for Ohio State athletics, but we also spend essentially every penny, and so the more that we generate, the more that we can invest back. So whether it's Saddle Up, which was a great event with Darius Rucker and so many fans and donors, bought tables and auction items. Again, it's difference making money, difference making opportunity, and what we want under the mantra where everyone's a Buckeye. We want all fans to feel like they can do their part, whether it's 50 cents because they rounded up, or whether it's $50,000 at a Saddle Up event, or $5 million, right, to give to a facility project or an endowment. Those are the kind of things we want people to sink their teeth into, is that everyone's a Buckeye, and let's try to capitalize on, maybe this new era and these new conversations that we can have.
For sure. And can we expect to see anything else? Maybe I know they approved the sponsorships on jerseys and stuff. Is there anything, upcoming next season that you would want fans to look out for?
Yeah, it's a great point. The NCAA did approve, they govern the uniform, construct, if you will, where logos can go and how many logos. So they did approve where you can have up to 2 logos in addition to our Nike. I'm wearing the OSU golf course, zip up here, so it's not a Nike branded, but we can have Nike, we can have the Ohio State logo, and we can have up to 2 additional sponsor logos. So we're active in the marketplace. We don't have anything announced yet. We don't have anything across the finish line. We're working with various companies right now to try to land something that would be meaningful financially, but also be tastefully done. We want to make sure it's integrated. But those are, again, new opportunities that are in the field right now that we have to capitalize on. Again, some people may not like it, but they also expect us to win and have the resources. And so those are all the things that are going into this this new era, if you will.
For sure. And something else that was new during your tenure was the revenue share. And, we're ending the first full season with it. How do you think it went this season? Can we expect any changes to it on a year-to-year basis? Just can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, we could probably spend a couple shows talking about the landscape of college athletics. And when you say revenue share, that came about because of a court case settlement called the House case. House versus NCAA, and all the autonomy conferences were a party to that as well. And we settled on a formula where we have 22% of certain revenue categories, which equaled $20.5 million this past year. That number, so a little bit of a change, that number goes up 4% a year. So this year it'll be a little over $21 million. We'll increase our allotment for football, increase our allotment for men's basketball, a little bit for women's basketball. Volleyball has an increased allotment. So those 4 sports, women's volleyball, those 4 sports are what we're gonna stay consistent with this coming year, where those sports have the revenue share formula. So you won't see a lot of change structurally. Again, a little bit of an increase. And then the other thing that was sort of a nuance is any new scholarship that we added this past year had to count against the $20.5 million. That comes off the table. So we'll actually have a full allotment of the $21 million of cash that we'll give and distribute to the student athletes. So we want to be strategic about that money. We want to make sure we use it the right way. Again, back to the retention, doesn't get a lot of chatter per se. The fact that we were able to retain the right folks, a lot of that came, from that revenue share bucket. So continuing to be strategic. And then the other race is how do we build out the third party NIL opportunities, above and beyond that. And so those are all the things that we're going through right now. But we're aggressive. We're at the top of the top of the chain, if you will. And we want to, maintain our place, in this hierarchy.
Did you ever expect when you got into college athletics to have to deal with like this, everything is it not crazy to you that you have to deal with all of this like nowadays? It's just,
my first full-time job in college athletics will be 30 years this summer of 1996. And at the time, the fundamentals were, sell tickets, raise money for projects, hire the right coaches, make sure you were sound academically, make sure athletes didn't get in trouble, make sure you followed the NCAA rules, and that was pretty much it. Right? Maybe there was every now and then there was some cutting edge, technology or whatever. I remember when the outsourcing of sponsorship started happening in the late 90s, and a lot of people were like, "Whoa, this is fundamentally changing. You mean we're going to actually have signage in our stadium, and we're going to put, people are starting to build video boards so you could actually have commercials, inside your stadium." And now look how far it's come, right? We're going to jersey patches with sponsors, and we have, Safe Light Field at Ohio Stadium. Things have come so far, commercial activity, NIL. So no one thought it would evolve to this. But in a lot of ways, we were our own worst enemy in not adapting to technology, not adapting to social media, not allowing athletes to monetize through social media and through YouTube and video games. And so we put ourselves behind. Amateurism really started to dwindle in that early 2000 period, and we really didn't adapt. So now there's a catch-up period, and it's happening fast, and the change is rapid, and we need to be, on the cutting edge. So, but a lot different than summer of 1996.
I bet.
When I first started.
Another new thing kind of coming about that's made news is the executive order that happened, I believe, on April 4th. There's a lot of uncertainty around it, whether it will actually come into effect next year, what will happen. Can you just, kind of speak to people who might not know a lot about it, about how it might affect Ohio State?
Yeah, the fascinating thing, back to sort of your question about, could you have imagined working on these things? The same thing applies with sort of government relations. Again, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we would see our delegation, congressmen and women, the governor, state representatives, and we would have some maybe social interaction with them, but there wasn't a whole lot of work interaction, if you were, or sort of business discussions. Now, that's almost a full-time part of what I do. I probably talk to our government relations folks at least twice a week, sometimes 3 or sometimes every day. So there's a lot of moving parts. So now, because of the legal threats, because we haven't been able to set the rules accordingly without going into the courtroom and facing a legal challenge and basically being sued as an industry, we need to rely on our stakeholders in Congress and in the White House. So the good thing is President Trump cares about this initiative, cares about college sports. He's paying attention to it. The executive order, a lot of things have already been laid out in court. And so the executive order doesn't have a whole lot of legal authority, and that was admitted, in the document itself. It was admitted during a meeting at the White House where a lot of participants were there. So what we have to do is we have to monitor what's in that executive order. We have to see, is there anything that can stick? And then we have to really get to a place where if we're really going to govern without any sort of legal risk, we have to have Congress codify a few things. And so that was in the executive order, that we still need Congress to act. We still need state law preemption. We need an antitrust exemption. We probably need to have some category, for student athletes not all the way to employment, but they need some protections. We need to be able to, sort of house the enterprise in a structured manner. We need some laws and rules around eligibility, right? Now we have athletes playing 6, 7, 8 years. There might be a high school, an athlete that, leaves high school, he's a freshman, she's a freshman, and she's competing against a 25-year-old or a 26-year-old. That wasn't what college athletics was built on. So we need some, legal structure, but the only place that can do that is Congress. So we're paying attention to the executive order. We're working with our delegation. We're working with our colleagues within the Big Ten to make sure that we're all on the same page and that we, come out of this with some sort of clarity, some sort of structure, whether that's 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 2 years from now. We've got to get to a point where we have that clarity, and I think the executive order puts a lot of things out there that we need to pay attention to, and now we have to do the real work, really with the congressional piece, to affect the major change that needs to happen.
Yeah, and I'm sure we could talk about all that stuff for probably 3 episodes.
We need to go back to civics class, right, and political science
Seriously.
to navigate all this. But the good thing is it's an elevated conversation when it comes from the White House. It's an elevated conversation when you have multiple, people that care about college sports paying attention to this. Clearly, Ohio State, we should be in a leading position on this. And so, having those conversations is going to continue.
For sure. And I want to transition into some facility stuff. There was a recent survey sent out about fan changes that could be seen to the Schottenstein Center and the Horseshoe. What was the idea behind the department sending that out?
Again, back to sort of where we are as an industry, one of the things that is not going to go away is you still need to have nice facilities. You still need to have modern facilities. And if you look at Ohio Stadium, if you look at the Schottenstein Center, almost 30 years old now, the Schottenstein Center, it's a great building. It looks great. But how do we adapt that building to sort of where we are today? How do we take a 104-year-old stadium like Ohio Stadium and make sure it operates because it is aging. So make sure we have the infrastructure to do that. Make sure we have things that speak to all fans that sit in D-deck and fans that have a suite, right? And everything in between. How do we make sure we have the right mixture of seating? So what we want to do is we want to use some data to inform decision making. So the survey around Ohio Stadium is really taking into account what does premium seating look like? What's the right mixture? Is there a demand for it? Part of doing the survey data is to identify maybe customers that we don't know about. There's a lot of people that come into our stadium that buy a ticket. Maybe it's a single game ticket. Maybe they buy it through the secondary market. We have all that data, but we really don't know who they are. We really don't know, are they interested in being, a bigger investor, if you will, or a bigger donor, making a bigger investment. So we want to use that data to inform decision making. What's the right percentage? Right now Ohio Stadium has about 3.5% of the total capacity as premium seating. A lot of our peers that are driving even more money than we are in this category are 6, 7, 8, almost 10% of their stadium. Can we get to that stage? I don't know. Without data, we can't really make those informed decisions. So, and then producing that kind of new revenue obviously gives us the revenue opportunity, but then it allows us to invest in other parts of the stadium. We know we need more restrooms. We know we need more concessions. If you walk around the east side of the stadium, really between kind of upper B deck, there's a whole nother concourse area where we could expand. We could fill in, there's basically a gap. We could fill in concrete, we could fill in restrooms, concessions. So those are the kind of things that we want to explore by using this survey and using this data. And then same thing with the Schottenstein Center. And then we're also going to test some conversation around ice hockey. What's demand for season tickets around a new ice hockey arena? And so we want to get that project off the ground as well. So look, data can be your best friend. It can inform decision making. So pushing that out there. It's amazing anytime you mention a project around the stadium, it garners attention. We probably had more attention around just doing the survey than anything that I've done here, in the 2 years that I've been here. So it's a big deal. the stadium belongs to the people of Ohio. That's how it was built. We need to treat it as such, and so we need to make informed decisions by using this survey.
And was part of that data kind of the premium seating, like you mentioned? I think it mentioned net worth in the survey.
Yeah.
Why did the department feel like it was important?
Yeah, I mean, basically, again, sort of from a prospect angle standpoint, again, there's a lot of people that are Buckeye fans who probably would invest if we knew who they were. And by doing this survey, and if we can test, some net worth, metrics, and we can then engage with them and reach out to them individually or in a mass scale, then we want to do that. And so just again, it's information, it's informed data. People don't have to click that button if they don't want to. But having that information is just valuable to how we engage and how we grow the enterprise.
We're also in the midst of the college basketball transfer portal season for men's and women's, and we talked a lot about retention. That's kind of been the name of the game for both men's and women the last 2 years, kind of following a similar path this year. Do you think retention, especially in a sport like basketball where we see some teams lose 12 out of 15 of their players and you kind of have to field almost a whole new team, do you think retention kind of curves some of that change that maybe can occur?
Absolutely, and that again, I think the teams that are going to be successful, the programs that are going to be successful in this era, yes, there's resources and there's NIL and there's revenue sharing and all those kind of things, but do you have the right culture? Do you have the right leadership? Do you have the right coaching? Do you have the right chemistry within your program? If those things are all clicking at a high level, then you should be able to retain, the right players. You should be able to retain a nucleus of young men and women, back in your program. So I know that was a big focus of Coach McGuff and Coach Diebler, is let's start there because we have a great foundation, on both sides in both programs, and then sprinkle in newcomers, sprinkle in the high school athletes that we already signed. So that, again, that continuity and older players, I mean, again, right, look at who won the national championship. Older teams, you look at as talented as Arizona, is and was, a lot of freshmen played, and then they get to the Final Four and they play an experienced team, and that can show up. So those are the kind of things that you have to lean into, and I know both coaches and both programs are doing that.
And when you look at Michigan, they had 5 starting players who were all from the portal. I mean, in college basketball especially, how important do you think it is to add through the portal nowadays?
Yeah, again, make sure it's the right fit, right? Make sure, one, they can play, obviously, but is it going to be the right fit? And frankly, the last couple of years on the men's side, we had talent, but it didn't quite fit, right? And it didn't quite work out. And so where we want this program to be, we want this program to be a consistent NCAA tournament program, make deep runs in the tournament, compete for championships. We've done it before. We should be able to do it in this era. So we're giving Coach Diebler those resources to do that. Same thing with Coach McGuff. So the portal is a big piece of that. But if you don't get it right, then it's not going to work. And so we've got to get it right. And I know we're making sure we do that in this offseason.
And Jake said on a radio show, I believe it was a few days after the TCU game, he said he feels like the program's in a lot better spot from a roster construction standpoint behind the scenes going in to this offseason than they were last. Can you talk a little bit about the NIL support that the team is receiving this year?
Yeah. Look, again, in this era, right? I mean, it's all fluid, and so there's more support this year than there was last year, just like there was the year before that. I mean, I was talking to some folks and talking about, the first couple of years of NIL for basketball, there was, basically a couple $100,000. And now, again, based on data that we know, we can verify, because there's a lot of data that is unverifiable, right? You can just go on social media and you can read all these wild reports. Based on data that's verifiable, we're in a great spot with both men's and women's basketball to be competitive. I know we can be, but it's one thing to just say, well, we have all this money, but how are we deploying it? How are we making the right decisions? Are we adding the right kind of depth? To me, that's way more important, but I know based on where we were last year, based on where we are going into this offseason, we have a lot of support, for basketball in both programs, men's and women's.
And you said, you got to find the right fit through the portal, but you only have like a month to kind of evaluate players and stuff. Like, how difficult is that to evaluate a guy and kind of get to know him in that period while other schools are also reaching out to him, so you feel pressure to get him? Like, how difficult is that?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, the best sort of outcomes can also be based on previous, relationships. So, Coach Diebler, you just take Scottie Pippen Jr., right? Coach Diebler had been with that family for a long time, back to his Vanderbilt days. So there's a built-in connectivity, there's a built-in relationship, there's familiarity, there's trust, right? And also, oh yeah, by the way, he's a pretty good player, right? So all of those things kind of layer into it. So to me, the relationships matter, but the scouting matters. In this era, again, probably not the right structure, but there's starting to be outreach the 1st of February. Hey, agents are reaching out saying, the person I represent is going to be available. They're going to go in the transfer portal. And then you have to say, okay, thanks for that intel. When he goes in, we'll talk to him. We would have interest in him, right? So those are the kind of things that you have to navigate in this cycle. So your staff has to be tuned in. The head coach has to be tuned in. The NIL infrastructure has to be tuned in to say, okay, this is how Ross, and then the same things happen to your current team. Are we making sure that, again, we want to retain Junie, we want to retain Amari and Yvonne, right? So we got to make sure that those guys are in a good spot, in this process. So there's a lot of moving parts to this whole new era.
Yeah, and men's basketball has faced some attendance challenges last year. There were a few Big Ten games, specifically weekday games, that weren't well attended. And fans were kind of criticizing the Schonstein a little bit and kind of the size of it. What is the department doing to kind of, change the atmosphere, so to speak, at the Schonstein?
Yeah, looking back at the data, we had 4 games over 12,000 people. And they were all, to your point, all Big Ten games. The other thing that we need to really work on is we need more weekend Big Ten games. Last year we only had a few where we were playing either on Saturday or Sunday, and that matters. So because we have so many TV windows, we could be playing on a Tuesday night at 9 o'clock, and we could be playing on a Thursday night at 6:30. The inconsistency of that, I think, leads to some of that. And then frankly, look, the product, we need to make sure that we're winning at a higher level and being more consistent. So let's not forget that piece of it. But what we've tried to do, we redid the lighting this year, we redid some of the music this year. We painted the court a gray style court. I think that really popped in a lot of ways, made the arena darker so it's a little more ambiance, inside the bowl. We're looking at different ticket pricing, for next year. We're redoing the video board and the LED boards for next year to add more sort of, pop and sizzle to the arena to increase the fan experience. So it starts on the court. Do people believe in that? It starts with, hey, I want to be in that arena. I don't want to miss the FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. It starts with a lot of student engagement to make sure that they're bringing, energy. And I think our students did a great job this year, given some of the circumstances by not having those weekend games. I think they did a great job. So looking to engage them some more. But there's a lot of things we can do, but the most important thing is let's be consistent on the court, and let's have a product where people, they want to be there and they want to just get their fix on Ohio State basketball. So there's a lot to it that we're working on, and I think it's going to be exciting as we go into next year.
For sure. And Ross, I'll leave you off on this. One of the biggest things that happened at Ohio State this year was Ted Carter stepping down and Ravi coming in.
Yeah.
Ted was very involved with athletics, and you see him at every football game. He was very involved. How do you think that transition will that affect the athletic department at all?
Yeah, there was obviously a lot of people were in shock. The entire campus community, was in shock, when all that happened. Especially, it happened so suddenly, on that Monday morning, back in March. But really, credit to our board of trustees for making a decisive decision to name President Bellamconda to the role in a permanent basis. That really provided stability. It provided clarity. My engagement with Ravi started when he first started back in January of 2025, and I think 5 days on the job, he's at the national championship game, and I remember joking with him, saying that, is it this easy? It was my first year. He was 5 days, and I said, no, it's not this easy, but let's celebrate it, at the time. And, yes, President Carter was deeply involved in athletics, but Ravi has picked up that torch, the first month into it. He and I have had great dialogue. He's energetic around athletics. He knows the value of athletics. He knows the passion that it brings as sort of that front door, that window in which the fans and our alumni and the general community, view Ohio State. A lot of times is through athletics. So let's make sure we're at the right spot. Let's make sure we treat it the right way. And Ravi, he'll be involved. He's super intelligent. He's got this great intellectual curiosity around athletics, especially around all the governance things that are happening. So he'll plug right in, he'll fit right in. He already knows a lot of the Big Ten presidents, which is critical. He's already connected with Commissioner Petiti. He's connected with a lot of our head coaches already. So I don't think we're gonna miss a beat. I think we're gonna have an energetic leader who's already diving in, and it's gonna be exciting to see everything come together. And there's still other iterations that have to come, to fruition around athletics. Clarity, structure, leadership, finances, creativity, the things we talked about. And we're going to need President Bellamconda to, be at the forefront, and he's already leaning in. So I think it's going to be a great relationship, and just appreciate his leadership and his perspective.
For sure. Thanks for coming in, Ross. That's all.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jack.